as you've experienced Omaha's dining scene, kind of what's your overall take? What do you think of it?
So far, me and my wife have loved it here.
Hey there, Omaha. Welcome into another episode of Restaurant Hoppen. I'm your host, Dan Hoppen, and today we are going to focus on two things that I feel like we don't talk about enough on this show, and that is steakhouses and wine. And in doing so, we're going to feature a guest who was not born here, is not from here, and a restaurant that didn't start here. So this is new ground for me, but I'm growing, people. I'm learning. There are things that can be learned from chain restaurants, especially when they are led by very talented individuals like my guest today. This is Andrew Roy. He is the general manager at Mahogany Prime. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah.
So I want to start just kind of at a base level. So Mahogany Prime, it's not a massive chain, but it didn't start here in Oklahoma. There are a couple locations in Oklahoma in addition to the one in Omaha. But I want to look at your your role. When we talk about the role of general manager, I think most people understand, what a chef is. They understand what an owner is. But general manager, what does that mean?
Sure. The easy way to describe it, I'm in charge of the P&L. So all the money coming in and all the money going out. So in that one phrase, that's a lot. So anything from the server assistants that we hire, so what most restaurants would call bussers, how we're training them, the money spent there, to how much money we're spending on steaks and seafood, it all comes through my desk. So it's a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I cannot imagine doing that for a massive steakhouse. So what are some of the advantages and disadvantages of working for a larger restaurant group? And again, Mahogany isn't huge. There's 3 locations in Oklahoma and then the one here in Omaha. So we're not talking all over the country, but still more than just, your typical mom and pop. What are some of the advantages and disadvantages of working for a larger restaurant group as opposed to one that has one location and just 1 to 2 owners?
Oh, sure. So one of the things that I find a lot of benefit in, just having different people, different smart and capable people in different locations trying different things. So, for instance, we have a little bit different system. We have one of our server assistants, what most places would call bussers. He's been with us for 20 years, and so we have him pretty much leading the training and acting almost as a mentor whenever we bring new server assistants on. And that was something that most other stores really didn't incorporate. We have similar systems for servers and so the bartenders, that sort of thing. So having us try that out allowed other stores kind of to adopt that practice and actually bring that in. Other stores will have, different challenges, but with different challenges, they come up with different and interesting solutions. So we get to actually pull those into our store and try them out and see if it works. So really cool one, downtown Oklahoma City, they do extra long pre-shifts on Friday where they will do 15 minutes solely dedicated to one wine region or one winery, one winemaker, and then the rest of the information for another 15 minutes. And we actually adopted that, and that was super cool. Didn't work out as well here. Traffic Friday, most of our servers coming from downtown can be pretty intense. So
I imagine that's challenging.
People were pretty consistently late there, so yeah.
But that's something that you learn. Like you can adopt some practices, that are working for other locations, and some things you try out and you're just like, you know what? That works great for you guys. That's awesome. We need to do things a little bit differently here, and that's perfectly okay. What does that communication look like between you and general managers at other locations? Like, how is this information being shared?
We do have a text chain going for a long time. You kind of mentioned it earlier. I am not from here. I ended up in Omaha. I started out with this company in their Tulsa location, so I'm really close with their general manager still, Amy. We also have, we call him an area partner. So one gentleman, Jake, goes in between all the stores. He's probably up here about once every 2 weeks, spends 2 or 3 days. But he kind of oversees the concept, makes sure we're all doing what we're supposed to do, yes, but also making sure that we all kind of adhere to the mahogany aesthetic. The quality of the food is still high. But he's a really solid resource for information, and he kind of goes between, hey, they stack their plates like this here, and it's like, oh, good to know. Okay. And then we meet up about once every 3 months.
Okay. So that kind of helps ensure that there's cohesion, where if somebody goes to Mahogany in Tulsa and goes to Mahogany in Omaha, they're getting the same experience, but it also allows for some flexibility where, yeah, this location can have longer pre-shift meetings, or maybe this one doesn't, and that's okay. That's not affecting the diner. The diner is still having a great experience at both locations.
Exactly, yeah. We're describing the food the same way. We have the same food suppliers as far as is possible. Obviously, fish purveyors are different across state lines, but the steak's still from L&L, Chicago, and we've got to make sure everyone has a great meal. So, you
mentioned you're not from here originally, and this is something that we've talked about a little bit off the mics, but I'd love to discuss more. As someone, obviously I love Omaha's food scene, and I'm obsessed with it. I'm very passionate about it, but I've pretty much lived here my entire life. So I've done some traveling, I've eaten at other places, but my main dining experience has been here. You've been in other places. You've lived in Arizona. You've lived in Oklahoma. You've lived other spots. As you come in and you've kind of, I know being in a restaurant, you don't get a ton of opportunities to eat out, but just as you've experienced Omaha's dining scene, kind of what's your overall take? What do you think of it?
So far, me and my wife have loved it here. We have been on sort of an Indian kick lately. So I think me and you talked about Kanara at one point.
I will stump for Kanara every day of the week.
Sweet potato, tiki masala. It's like, I don't know who thought of that, but genius. Star Indian Cuisine is another little gem.
People keep telling me about that place, and I haven't been yet.
Well, it was my birthday last weekend, and so we went.
Happy birthday, belatedly.
Yeah, thank you. We went. They do a buffet about once a month, and we'd been just for their regular meal, and oh my gosh, yeah, one whole room is shut off, and it just, yeah, I stuffed myself. I did not eat dinner. Like it was great, but
I just put it on my list right now. I'm not messing around anymore. I'm gonna go.
Good. That Gather is really fantastic. I know we talked about that. Their burger is my go-to. Memoir, I think me and you discussed that briefly, but their food is really, really good. It's a strange and eclectic mix, the sushi plus everything else. But yeah, that's been one of my better meals here. And then V-Mertz, of course, always love that place.
But like as you look at the scene overall, like how strong do you think it is? Do you think there are any like cuisines that stand out where you're like, oh man, I don't see a lot of X here, but the Indian food is incredible, or the Italian restaurants have really surprised me? Anything like big picture kind of like that?
Big picture, I think it's probably just part of what people are expecting here too. What I find more often when I go out is the portion sizes are pretty big. It's I'm trying to think of the right way to say this, but we
got those Midwest appetites.
It's a hearty serving portion. Me and Ann split most meals, and we're happy we did. I do think that a lot of the like non-American fare that I've tried here, so when we've been branching out to the Indian cuisine, that's where I feel like Omaha is really strong. And then creativity too, because you do have a lot of just like standard steak and potatoes, which great. I mean, that's where I make my living.
Right. Nothing wrong with steak and potatoes.
But that interesting and like elevated cuisine, the V-Mertz, I just had a dinner there the other night, and they just knocked it out of the park. The flavors were intense and rich. Probably the best steak I've had, except from my place. Their Wagyu, I think it was Wagyu ribeye, medium rare. It's perfect. Yeah.
We just went to V-Mertz for our anniversary a couple weeks ago, and yeah, I had some of the best duck I've ever had. The things that they do in that kitchen are truly incredible. And they are very proficient in wine, which is what I want to talk about next, because I know that is one of your passions. What draws you to wine?
When I first got into it, before I got into management, I was bar centric. So I'd always loved being a bartender, started doing it in college and just kept doing it. It's so complex. There's so much to it. And there's so much that you can continue to study year after year and you never feel like you grasp it all. And so I wanted to see how far I could go, and I just kept studying and kept learning about it. I had the pleasure, because when I was in college, it was in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I got in just kind of by luck into this little Italian restaurant, El Piatto, and that's where I really was studying the hardest. That's where I got my level 1 sommelier certification for the first time, and then was studying for the second the whole time I was there. And Italy, do you drink much Italian wine?
No.
Oh yeah, it's wild, you know. And if you look at Italy itself, it's only been unified as a nation very recently in modern history. So we think of Italy as one thing nowadays, but it's really this fractured conglomerate of all these different nation states back in the day. And so if you go from the north in Piedmont with the Barolo Barbaresco, you go to South Italy, it's an entirely different style of wine. It's rich and intense, and it's basically their version of Zinfandel. And so it's between those two, it's night and day. You've got things in the middle. You got Tuscany. There's just so much you can get to, and having that be the place that I was studying, I'm like, this is endless. This is an endless rabbit hole. So
did you actually go to Italy?
No,
or just an Italian?
I never have.
Okay,
yeah, no,
but in an Italian restaurant. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Is that on the bucket list?
Someday, yeah. So I've only been to Mexico and Canada. So it's only this continent so far.
So what was it that, you kind of mentioned you got interested in the drink side of things while you're bartending. You're working at this Italian restaurant. What opened your eyes and made you go whoa, this wine thing is really cool. I want to dive into this.
Well, Santa Fe is such an interesting scene because it's smaller than Omaha, but so many people throughout the entire world and all this nation and overseas all want to travel and go there. So you have this tiny population with just the entire world traveling just to see it. And so even though the population of New Mexico is, I think, a third, maybe less than here, their access to allocated wine and their ability to get high-end wines is insane, because so many wealthy people go there to retire. Just they command a lot in terms of wine. I was a young whippersnapper, and I was just starting to learn how to bartend and just out of college. And there was a gentleman, Mark Johnson, really, really fantastic, really well-versed wine, just professional, must have been in his 40s, 50s, general manager of restaurants. But, he taught a free wine class. And so I just started going, and I didn't know what to expect, and it was great. Learned how to blind taste, found a really great tasting group that met at El Piatto, and we all decided we were going to study and go for our level 2, and we did. So it's just that community. You finding people that are interested and just looking into a group that, wow, this is actually if I had known going back, I would have, knowing what I know now, I would have paid for that course. I just can't believe he was just doing that for free out of the goodness of his heart.
So you became a certified sommelier in 2013. I believe you're still working on your advanced sommelier certification, correct?
I am, yes.
What does that entail? What level of learning are we talking about?
Sure. And it might be helpful. Do you mind if I kind of go through what the 4 levels are?
Absolutely, dude.
Sure.
This is your platform. You do what you want to do. I'm just the dopey host.
Sure. So most people know the quartermaster somms through their intro exam. And so they do it now after COVID online, but essentially you go through a course. It's a 2-day thing if you do it in person. I don't know exactly how they break it up online. That's after my time. And you take a 70-question test. So you need a 60% on that test to pass, and somewhere in the realm of 80 to 90% usually pass. So if you pay attention during the course, if you've studied wine or worked in the industry before, you'll usually pass. Certified is the first one where there is no class, you show up and it's a 3-part test where you do what they call theory. So usually 70-ish questions on wine laws and different vintages, that sort of thing. They kind of ramp up the difficulty from the last one. And then you do a service. So you show up and they make essentially a fake restaurant. And you have a master sommelier, kind of their highest level, sitting there. And they're asking you questions. And you open up a bottle of sparkling wine. And they make you pretend like you're in a restaurant. And you carry a tray of champagne. And make sure you don't open the bottle and safely or anything like that.
Oh, wow.
And then you blind taste, too. And so you smell a couple of wines and taste them, and you have to describe the wine and then tell them what grape and vintage and region and all that. For that certified, that level 2, it's written, which is actually kind of nice because when you're talking out loud and you're stressed and people are watching you, it's very easy to lose your train of thought. Then level 3, they make you come out to take this week-long course. And then after that, you apply. I could tell you about the last year's because I just got through it. Everywhere in the U.S., they have these remote tests. And so you show up. It's about an hour. Last year was 121 questions. And you need a 60% to go from that test to do the other parts. I think it was something around like 250 people in the U.S. took it. I think like 50 passed that first round. So once you get past that, you do the service and the tasting. But now it's super ramped up, and you have 2 tables. It's about an hour. Last time I went, I had a group of a sparkling wine table with a couple of master somms, and they asked all sorts of questions. They're trying to throw you off the whole time. It's a nightmare. And I remember some of those questions, so we can talk about it if you want. And then you blind taste 6 wines out loud in 25 minutes, 4 minutes, 10 seconds for each. And so you smell it, describe it, tell them what it is, and move on. And yeah, so I didn't get through the theory part this year. You needed 60%. I got a 59%.
Oh,
I know. The year before we were opening the new store, and then the year before that, I did get through the theory. I passed the service, and I was below on tasting, if I remember. I think I got like a 55%. So you have to do all in 1 year.
I mean, it sounds incredibly intense.
Yeah.
But especially like the live service portion.
Yes.
Talk to me more about that, because I cannot even imagine where my nerves would be during that.
So I will always remember. So they show you to a room, essentially, and then right outside the room you have the maitre d', and he says, essentially, this is the restaurant. And so he hands us a menu, and he says, you have 5 minutes to study this. And so you look at it, and it was the year I did it, it was an Italian restaurant, mostly northern Italy, some southern Italy dishes, but they don't describe it. It's just you kind of have to know. And so you're taking notes and trying to remember what you can. Then they take the menus back. They tell you, here's the situation. Your table, we didn't have the table ready, so they're a little late. They're a little upset. Just, again, trying to
throw you off.
We're going to win them back. Here's this wine we're going to give them. It was a sparkling wine. I remember there was something about the wine that you were supposed to remember, but he's telling you all this, and you're trying to write notes, and you walk in, and so you bring the wine over, and the first thing the lady said to me was, "What is this?" Again, they're trying to throw you off, and just like, we're sorry we had to make you wait. And she's like, "Oh, well, we didn't order this. We're not paying for this, right?" And it's like, no. And then they start asking you about the different wines, and they tell you the friend at the table has an allergy, and what can they eat, and you hope that your notes about the menu were good, and you just kind of go for it. So
now that's the job that I want to have, and I know that it's well earned. But like where you're just sitting at a table, like ordering wine and drinking wine and trying to mess with young sommeliers, like that sounds like a blast.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they had a lot of fun with it.
So that kind of gets into something else I wanted to talk about, and it brings me back actually to the first time I went to Mertz. My wife and I, we did a wine dinner there, and I was so amazed by their general manager and sommelier, a man, Matthew Brown, who is just like, he's the pro's pro, he's the dude in Omaha when it comes to wine and just hospitality in general. And with each course comes and a wine is paired with it, and the guy was like, he had like a bedtime story for each of these wines. I mean, he was telling us where it's from, what cask it came from. This is the person who discovered it. Here's how here's how the grapes are harvested. Here's how it's, I mean, basically like 2 to 3 minutes on every wine. And obviously he knew the 6 wines that were going to go with the 6 courses that night. But you have to be prepared. Maybe you don't have to go in that much detail, but you have to be prepared to intelligently speak on every wine on Mahogany's menu. And I looked at it before this. That's like hundreds of wines. How do you study all that and educate yourself? So if somebody, because at any point in the night, somebody could call you over, point to one line or one wine on that giant list and say, hey, tell me about this one. What's the flavor profile? Where does it come from? And you got to be ready to be able to give them an answer. How do you study for that?
Well, I mean, I would say the honest answer is there's a certain limit to what you can know.
Sure.
So I'm very comfortable with, if someone calls me over, my first task is not usually to show off what I know, but to figure out what they're looking for or what they expect. Because maybe, they pointed to Silver Oak Napa because their friends have talked about it and they've only tried the Alexander Valley or something. So I like to say, what have you had in the past? What have you enjoyed? And that will usually tell me. If they say, oh, I don't really drink wine, it's like, oh, okay. That kind of gives me a range. You may not want to go to the high end if you don't want to go there and waste your money if you don't know that for sure you're going to like it, honestly. Sometimes they'll tell me that they have always enjoyed Rich Ripe, and it's like, oh, okay, let's go this way, I don't know if that's really an answer to your question.
Well, I think it is to some extent. I mean, like you said, you can't have intimate knowledge of every wine on the menu.
Sure.
But yeah, I think asking some of those questions and trying to help someone kind of choose their own adventure is probably the wise way to go. What is the key to pairing wine with food?
Oh, yeah. So if you're going to bet on one horse, bet on acidity. So that crisp fill in your mouth when you're tasting a white or red, matching that with the food and thinking about that first is going to be your easiest path into making a good or at least acceptable pairing. So you can either use acidity to match what you have in the dish or contrast. And so let's imagine you have a rich, like very creamy, like mac and cheese. Some nice, crisp white wine. Like that dish has a little bit of weight, so maybe a little bit oak. So maybe like not a super butter bomb, but like, just a nice, lightly oaked but very refined Chardonnay with that mac and cheese. That's going to be killer, So as I was talking through that too, the second way to really start thinking about that is weight. So what's going to match the weight of things too? Because if you think about, and it's easier to see with white wines, let's say like Muscadet to Pinot Grigio, say, all the way up to your super ripe, rich Californian Chardonnays, you have a range of light, easy drinking all the way to heavy, intense, and food kind of matches that. So you think if you're like beet salad versus, again, mac and cheese or steak, like that's a huge range, and one's light and you could probably eat 2, and one's like, that's a meal. After that, you do have to kind of think red wine tannins, they call them, so the mouth puckering quality. Those are super great with fatty meats, things like ribeyes. Super tannic wines, a lot of that grit aren't usually that great with things like fish. So you have a couple of, like, in your back pocket, do's and don'ts. And then, honestly, drink what you like. So if you're enjoying your rosé with your steak, like all the more power to you, you know? So
how do you educate yourself on new wines? Because there's constantly new stuff coming out. There are wines that you haven't encountered before that you're experiencing. How do you educate yourself on the new stuff?
Tasting and reading. Yeah. It's a constant thing that you just have to keep looking at, honestly. I do have a lot, like, it is very nice being at Mahogany where we have a very, deep list when it comes to like Napa Sonoma, Cabernets. If I were at a place that was more world cuisine, a lot more like chef driven, a lot more experimental, then I would have a much higher debt to pay for. There are all these regions that are really popping up around the world, the Lebanons, and like even China is starting to come on the wine scene in certain ways. So it's like I would definitely need to study a lot more. But I mean, we have a lot of America True Cabernet and then Willamette Pinot Noir, and that's about 60% of the list right there. And you add in some Chardonnays, and then the little section that's the world wines down here. So.
Okay, yeah. We can talk more about wine, but I want to get back to Mahogany and
Sure.
kind of the overall experience. Something that fascinates me is the front of the house and the back of the house. So front of the house is servers, generally general manager like yourself, waitresses, hostess, those type of roles, bartenders, that's front of the house. Back of the house is chefs, kitchen, sous chefs, prep work, garde-manger, all that stuff. Those are two pretty separate operations in a lot of restaurants. And sometimes it can feel like two different worlds, and a lot of the times those worlds might even be a little at odds with each other. The kitchen isn't, tickets aren't coming in right from the front of the house. Front of the house thinks the kitchen's being too slow. They need to get food out, whatever it might be. How do you, as the general manager, kind of the one who's overseeing everything, how do you create cohesion between those two worlds and set each of them up for success?
Well, sure. What I try to do, and I don't know if it's been successful, but what I try to do, all of our management team is cross-trained. So we do have one gentleman who's entirely, like, he's our kitchen manager. He almost entirely works back there. But even he will work some front of house shifts every once in a while. All of our managers will pull at least once a month a kitchen shift. Next Wednesday, I'll be back there. So if you get a steak that's burnt, that's my bad. So having a little bit of that flow back and forth does help a lot because you get to see both set of eyes. But of course, our main broil guy, he doesn't come and wait tables. He's our main broil guy. So having that one person who's stepped in both worlds being on the expo. So we always have a manager at that expo stand from open to close. That does help a lot because there's that communication aspect. Sure, if my table is taking longer, I need to communicate something to the kitchen and I'm a server. I'm not going to go and talk straight to, Hector, the broil. I'm going to talk to John, who's the kitchen manager who I've worked with in front of house too. And there's at least that one point of reference who can communicate. So I think keeping those lines of communication open helps a lot of that antagonistic divide not exist. But, I mean, it's a restaurant. It's busy.
Sure.
Like, every once in a while, mistakes happen, and sometimes you're wondering where your food's at, and sometimes you're wondering why they didn't mod it correctly, and that's the world we're in.
Right. And everyone makes mistakes in every line of work. Nobody's perfect. But I'm fascinated in what you just said. Like when you say, I'm going to be in the kitchen next Wednesday, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said like your role is expediter, right?
When a manager works a back of house shift, yeah.
Okay. So just for anyone who doesn't know what that is, that's the person who's kind of at the front of the kitchen who is calling out tickets as they come in, who's figuring out, hey, what needs to go to what table. Basically, you're in charge of the kitchen and kind of establishing the flow of how everything works. And I have to ask you about this because of everything that I've learned about restaurants, this is the role that just absolutely blows my mind. And I cannot understand how people expedite because like I'm thinking about just one table. Like if somebody orders, let's say you've got a table of 3 people and they each order a different type of steak. Those steaks might all have different cook times. They all need to rest. They might need to be plated differently. Each of those steaks is going to come with different sides that need to be either created or refired, whatever it might be. They might get, a couple appetizers, a couple desserts. Like all this is crashing around in your head, and it all has to come out at the same time. It all has to come out hot and juicy and fresh. And that's one table. Mm-hmm. And you've got, I don't even know how many of those tables inside of Mahogany, and the tables are constantly shifting. There's new people coming in. There's people leaving. Like, the role of an expediter, I just, can't even wrap my head around how you have all this knowledge in your head at one time to get things out to the table at one. Like, how did you learn how to do that?
Training and systems, honestly. So you just have to have a way to quickly deal with information coming, sort it out. And yeah, you're right. You can't keep it in your head. So we have printed tickets and we write times on that and we keep those. So we have different areas and just a lot of patience and training and systems. But,
fair enough.
Yeah.
There must be some secret sauce to it because I don't think my brain could handle that. I'd short circuit. And just
remind me, you've never worked the server bartender, right?
No, I've worked a couple shifts in restaurants just to kind of understand what a shift is like, but I've never had a consistent job inside of a restaurant. It's one of my great regrets, honestly.
It's very similar to the level of stress and organization you need in the well as a bartender when it's a busy restaurant, because you've got 15 tickets popping up and you've got 3 different things you have to do at once, and this had 2 beers, this is 1 beer, and 3 cocktails, and so you get used to that. Doing that for years, it's just like, oh yeah, it's another Tuesday.
What do you do in those moments? And I guess you don't have as many of them in the well. Is that like what it's called behind the bar? You call it in the well?
What the person who's making the drinks for the restaurant?
Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
In the well.
I just learned something new. Thank you. But what do you do when you get in the weeds there? And there's tickets flying in. And you feel like I've got to be making 7 drinks at once here. Like, how do you get yourself out of the weeds?
I think if you can not panic, that's about 90% of the battle.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point, come what come may, you have this ticket, so you're going to make them one way or another. So you can either panic and make the first one and the second one, or look, strategize, say, all right, I got these 3, they're the same, I'll make them all at the same time, and you just dig yourself out one at a time, and then see what happens. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the food. Mahogany has an executive chef. His name is Brad Johnson. He works in the Oklahoma headquarters. How often do you communicate with him about what's on the menu, what's working on the menu, what new things Mahogany is working on that might be coming soon? Like, how do you as a general manager at a separate location communicate with him? What's that look like?
Sure. I talk to him less these days. I used to be a full kitchen manager down in the Tulsa location, so I talk to him a lot. But me and Chef Brad Johnson, so he'll actually, if there's a new dish coming up that he wants to make sure we see the spec demonstrated in person, he'll come up here. So I've seen him up here a couple times so far. He also, when they have meetings, because they're so Oklahoma-centric, I usually travel down to Oklahoma, so that's where I've seen him more often lately. My head kitchen manager, John, he texts him a lot, so it's mostly text communication. He's in email too, and he's a busy guy, so he's running these restaurants and prepping food and tasting different foods. So for us, it's mostly remote conversations, but we also we share like a Google Drive folder that he kind of controls, so he can drop recipes in there and specs and videos if there's something that he wants to make sure we have the actual demonstration. That way he doesn't have to drive 14 hours to show us how to do one thing.
It's probably a more efficient way of handling things.
Yeah.
Steak cookery is something that people have very particular preferences on.
They do.
And everyone has different ideas. Like one person's medium rare might be another person's medium, might look completely blue to another person, and those preferences can all be different from what the kitchen's expectations are. As a general manager, when there are disparities in expectations of how a steak should be cooked, how do you handle those and ensure that people still have a good experience?
Sure. So our training, our servers will always start by, let's say you were ordering an 8-ounce filet for me, and you said, I want that medium rare. I said, oh, okay. So warm red center. And you say, oh, okay.
So you set the expectation up front.
Exactly. So we'll always say what it should come out of the kitchen as. And, of course, we make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. I would say for as busy as we are, those broiler guys do a really good job. But, I always like to let the managers know and the servers. Sometimes, you've eaten at Mahogany, correct?
I actually haven't.
Yeah? Oh, sure.
No.
So one of the things we're really known for is we got the big, thick steaks. And so even if they've heard that warm red center or hot pink center, it comes out, it's a wall of pink. And so more often than not, people will see it and think, I want it a little more. But, when you have it in front of you, you see it. We get that. I understand that totally. So we'll take it back to the kitchen, and our broiler is so hot that it only takes a few moments, honestly, to take it up a little bit. All those are run back to the guests by managers just to make sure nothing else is happening. It's something we don't want to make sure, but really just to make sure the guest is happy with where they're at and what they have. And unfortunately, every once in a while, it's a tiny bit over, and so we'll bring a brand new steak, and that's always sad. Lose a steak, but it happens. Line of fire.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
You are someone who I've noticed is very thoughtful on Instagram. You have, especially probably over the last year, especially the last 6 months, you have posts that just really kind of get deep. And I wanted to ask you about a couple of those.
Oh, sure.
One, it was about tasting and blind spots. And you said we all have blind spots when it comes to tasting. And if we admit them, it's step one on the path to plugging the holes. What inspired this post, and what interested you in blind spots in tasting?
Sure. So I'm pretty sure that was from when I was really prepping, when I was hoping that I would get into the advanced this year. And so the whole game there is you have to start practicing early, on the assumption you're going to get in. So I was tasting a lot with Matthew, and then I found out I didn't get in, and it was kind of a relief because I was pretty busy. But there's this really fantastic book. The author, her name's Mandy Naglich. I believe it's How to Taste. But I was in the middle of that book, and she actually goes to a flavor scientist, and she walks through different chemicals and what she can and can't smell. And as I was going through and I was tasting the different things, I've always had trouble with, it's called rotundum. It's that peppery smell that shows up in wines. And so 9 times out of 10, you'll see me tasting a Syrah. I'm like, is there black pepper on this? And it just, every morning, if I'm making eggs, I always smell the pepper and kind of lock that scent in. And I know it's my weak spot. And yeah, that's why you gotta work on it.
How did you learn that was a weak spot?
You learn a lot of these when you taste with other people, because you have a group of 5 or 6 people that you trust and are good tasters, and they're all saying, "Oh, this smells like pepper," and you're smelling the glass. You're like, it does, huh? Yeah. So you start noticing those gaps in what everyone is saying and what you are picking up.
That's fascinating. I don't think I've ever had a conversation exactly like this before. So what are some other examples? You use the pepper example. Are there any others that you can think of, whether it's a blind spot that you've realized, or a coworker or something says, "Hey, I'm struggling with this. Can you help me figure out how acidic something should be, or how much citrus to use on something. Like, do you have any other examples?
Sure. That was a good one, actually. So I've got 2 servers that just actually got their certified in the last like month and a half. So I'd taste with them. Acid is always the one that's hard, because unless you have really a range that you've calibrated on, you taste it, you think, I don't know, medium plus, but you really need those, like, the difference between medium plus, and high can be different grape varieties when you're blind tasting. So you really want to have that calibrated, locked in. So yeah, just helping them prep for that. That was one that came up a lot. They actually spent a good amount of time with Matthew too, going on those Monday tastings. One of my personal ones that really still irks me to this day, telling Chenin Blanc and Riesling apart. And every time, because there's a group of different white wines and red wines, they call them the evil dwarves. And if you describe
the evil dwarves, that's awesome.
If you describe them and like, oh yeah, Riesling, especially if it's a dry Riesling, it's high acid, kind of fruity, like, and you describe Chenin Blanc that's dry, it's like, oh yeah, high acid, it's kind of fruity. Like, there's a lot of overlap. There's some stone fruit in there. There's some pomaceous fruit. But picking up those, like, you'll have like almost a wet wool element in a lot of Chenin Blancs, and that's one that I never trust myself, and so I never call it right. So
okay,
yeah.
Well, tasting blind spots, I'm going to be looking for those in myself, and I want to give a shout out to the book that you mentioned. I think I found it. How to Taste: A Guide to Discovering Flavor and Savoring Life by Mandy Naglich. Just came out in 2023.
Mm-hmm. No, she's super cool. She so there's actually a beer counterpart to the wine sommelier. It's called a Cicerone.
Oh, okay.
And so it's her journey, I believe, as she was going through the certified Cicerone. And beer is another whole beast, so
I'm sure we could get into that. But I have another Instagram post that I have to ask you
sure,
about.
sure, yeah.
And you said, I have a feeling that people greatly overcomplicate bars. How so?
So that, I won't tell the full story. So there was an instance, I won't even say what city it's in. It's not Omaha. I'll say that for certain. But a story that we still like, a lady who came up to a bar during a private event and was like, all she wanted was an espresso martini. And it was a private event where they purchased, like, the whole place was rented out. You only had a white wine, a red wine, and then like a couple of cocktails. And it turned into this whole thing. And it was all just so needless. And there was all this yelling and anger, and they had to be asked to leave, and the host was embarrassed.
Oh my gosh.
It was like, so I was talking with a friend about that. I'd forgotten that instance. And yeah, people sometimes overcomplicate bars, I feel like. It's just, you're going there to have fun, have a drink, relax, go home. It's super easy, and it was just a whole thing.
Is there a way to uncomplicate bars? I mean, you can only, like, as a restaurant or a bar, there's only so much that you can do to tailor a customer's experience. At some point, the way that they react is just going to be the way that they react, and you could provide the greatest hospitality in the world, and they're just, for whatever reason, you're just not going to click with them, and that's okay. But how, like, if someone is overcomplicating the bar experience, is there a way to kind of massage that and just kind of take them back down to the right level?
Oh, yeah. And it's what I always tell my managers too. Lead with hospitality. Give the person understanding. See them, The thing that stuck with me about that one was, it was just, we got the manager involved. As before I was a manager, I tried to, apologize. It's just, this is all they've purchased. And like, I'm sorry. And like, but yeah, it's just, some people sometimes will come on, they've had a rough day, and you just, you do your best and you smile and give them a little grace. And sometimes, I'd say most times, that's all you need.
So you got your career in this industry actually as you got started as a dishwasher.
Back in the day, yeah.
Why did you take that job, and what was it about getting involved in the industry that kind of pulled you in?
Well, okay. So that was in Texas where I grew up. So most of my childhood, Pampa, Texas. It was a little spot called Smokin' Joe's Bar and Grill, and I was 15, I believe, and I needed money because I needed a car. It was on the edge of town, and the job was dishwasher, cook, and server all at the same time, which kind of tells you how small the place was.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's a lot of hats to wear.
Yes, a lot of hats for any one kid. I didn't know what it was going to be like, but it paid well, and they needed someone who could work the hours I could because I was still in high school. And it was the first place I went to, honestly. After that, because that place did shut down, I started waiting more, and I was good at it. And it was easy. I could always find a job that I could do, and I never really had a problem with stress. I could handle complex and busy situations without falling apart, and that,
It's a huge part of the
it helps
job
a lot.
right there.
Yeah. And I've always been a little more active on my feet. My step count's at like 6 to 7 miles most times I work, and that's on slow nights. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah, I checked yesterday because I thought it'd be fun to know, and 6.6 miles yesterday, and I was like, we weren't that busy, so.
That's nuts.
But, you go back enough time, you check on the host, you make sure that the guys in the kitchen are doing well, and you go and you got a call, and so you got to go answer the phone and go back to the kitchen, and, that it adds up.
So, again, we're talking about the very start of your career, so maybe I won't even go there. I was going to ask what drew you to the front of the house versus the back of the house, but maybe I'll reframe it this way. What about your personality made you, do you think, gravitate more towards the front of the house and the service side?
Sure. I've always been really good at, I think, supporting and like seeing and hearing people out when I'm in front of them. So one of the best jobs I think I ever had, front of house, back house, anything, bar back. Just being able to quickly gauge what someone needs and be there to help them out. And it's not a dissimilar set of skills to what you do when you're a server. It's like they're here, they're asking about this thing. We also have this thing, so you can offer, but not hard sell. Just let them know we have something else, and be there, ready for a refill, and with a smile. So,
how did you get hooked up with Mahogany originally?
So, I got to go back to New Mexico for that briefly.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to college in New Mexico. Then when I was done, was bartending there. Ended up meeting my wife. We got married, and her parents actually taught at OSU in Oklahoma. So they were in a situation where we wanted to go and get them out of their current house, help them move to a new place, and just be close and help them out a little bit. So we ended up coming to Tulsa, no jobs, and just let's see what happens when we get there. And I happened to land a block away, more or less, from the Tulsa location. And they were actually in the process of moving to a new location. So they were upgrading and moving to a nicer facility. What we actually used and kind of improved to move to a new facility here. But they were looking for someone. I walked in, I met Amy, the general manager, and she asked me a couple questions, and then she said, "When can you start training?" I was like, "This week? Yeah, let's do it."
Mm-hmm. How long did you work there before the potential move to Omaha arose?
So I started there, it was October 2017. I joined the management team in 2018 in April, and then I moved up here. It must have been August or September 2023. Yeah.
So what was you're in the organization, you're working in Oklahoma for 6, 7, 8 years, whatever the math is there. I'm not very bright, so
yeah,
I can't
do
it on the fly. When they ask you, hey, can you come to Omaha? What was your, I'm sure obviously you said yes, but like what was your internal thinking?
Well, so Jake actually played this really well. They'd been looking for a GM who could stay here and be here for the long haul. And he actually asked me if I'd be interested in being a GM at another Housesmith concept. So they actually have like a pizza place, a breakfast place, and talked it over with my wife. And I told him, honestly, I love Mahogany, and I if a spot ever opened as a GM as a Mahogany, but I don't think I'd go to another concept. And he said, okay. And then about a week later, he asked, and I'd never been to Omaha before, so I had to think about that. Me and my wife had a couple of pretty intense conversations, especially like, how do you think about like where your parents at? And it's 7 hours away, and so we planned a trip up here and snuck into the old Mahogany and had dinner and checked it out, looked around some houses, and really loved it. We said, all right, let's do it.
Well, you've been here a couple of years now, and
yeah.
Happy to have you. Glad that you've been able to find some good spots around town. Something that I'm really fascinated with is you actually had the opportunity to kind of rebuild Mahogany here, and that it just recently moved. Now Mahogany is now located in the Heartwood Preserve area, and so when you first came in, like you're working with something that's already been established. I mean, Mahogany's been a part of Omaha for over 20 years. Like it's well established here, but this kind of allowed you to be a part of the building personality, and to, I'm sure a lot of things are just kind of, they're made by other decision makers, but you got a chance to speak into it and like think about restaurant design. How is this going to flow between front and back of house? Where do we want to put the bar? Things like that.
Yeah.
What was that process like for you to be involved in, like building a restaurant from the ground up?
So that was awesome. So, I kind of briefly touched on it, the Tulsa move, but when they moved to the new location in Tulsa, I was server bartender. So I was just there seeing what happened. And then in this, we actually got to have the input of like, what side of the bar do you want the tables to go on? What are the things that have always annoyed you about the Tulsa location that you could, if you could change, you would change? And so, not everything was taken that we suggested, but a lot was, honestly. So if you go to the Tulsa location, the tables in the bar are actually on the other side of the wall. They're right next to the bar. It was the one thing that we always just did not like. People don't like it. It's a little loud. It's kind of awkward. And so changing that wall changes everything. And then just, different locations of where like things are in the well, things in the bar, installed like the little spray rinse things in the bar. We always thought they should be in Tulsa. So yeah, a bunch of little things like that, but seeing all those little things added up, it's super cool.
How exciting was it for you to open that location? Because, I mean, like, you've been a part of established restaurants for so long, and, like, obviously, again, like I said, Mahogany's been a part of Omaha. It's not like, people were coming into Mahogany for the first time and being like, whoa. But it's still, you are opening a new restaurant, and diners are coming in and having a new Mahogany experience from what they're used to. What was that like for you?
Oh, it was awesome. Exhausting too. That week you don't really get a lot of free time. That we shut down for a week in between the move so that we could all kind of as a group make sure it was all set up and trained, and did a soft opening. But yeah, it was endless. But it was also really fun, and seeing everyone kind of freak out the first time they walk in, it's worth it. So, yeah.
Something, I was reading another interview that you did, and you talked about the importance of creating a space where a guest can watch their drink be made of them, and that's a really big deal. What is the connection that's made between a guest and a bartender when the bartender's making that drink, and why is it so important to be able to make that connection?
Sure. I always thought of bartending kind of the way you think of back house, front of house. So it's the most back of house response to what you can do in the front of house. So you're the one position where you are producing something they're going to consume. So it's like the appeal of having that open kitchen, like the boiler room, or I know you love that spot. So.
I do, very much.
So there's a connection, I think, that gets formed when you're seeing that person make that drink in front of you that you don't get. Like, you don't get to have the chef wait on you in most restaurants that you go dine, but you can have that bartender make your drink. And if it's a bartender that remembers your name and remembers what you have, like, it's a connection that really doesn't exist in any other position, honestly. It's super cool.
You know, it's funny, as I was preparing for this and I was thinking my way through that question, I had an experience last night where this came up, and I was thinking about, you know, places like a V-Mertz, a Boiler Room, a Dante, like some of my favorite restaurants around Omaha, Yoshitomo. Like, when you order a drink, you know, you might not be right next to the bar, but the bartender's in full sight, and you can see them at any time make your drink. And I dined at another restaurant last night, and we got old fashions and everything, and they came to the table, and they were fine. They weren't bad by any means, but it was just, I find myself, now that I was like actively thinking about that, I was like, yeah, I did kind of miss that experience. Like, it did feel a little bit less personal, and that's not saying anything bad about the other restaurant, but I did notice that, at least.
It's something, this is just different, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's different in the way that a closed kitchen restaurant is, yeah. It's just it's not open, but, you know, sometimes you want to have a conversation with your loved one and you don't want to watch the steak get cooked, you know? So.
Fair enough. All right, I got 2 more questions for you, Andrew, that I like to ask just about everybody who comes on the podcast.
Sure.
First one is this. What is one thing about the restaurant industry, hospitality industry, that you feel most guests don't understand that you wish they did understand?
You know, the first thing that popped in my head, and when you were asking that question, was that we're people too. But I do think a lot of people do get that too. I think it's only in a few instances that gets forgotten. But I think just remembering, you know, we're humans and we are here to have fun and serve you and make your life more pleasant. It just helps everything go around a little more smoothly.
Okay, and you've been in the restaurant industry for about 20 years now, maybe a little over 20 years.
Yeah.
What's your favorite thing about being a part of it?
I think I thrive in chaos.
Thrive in chaos.
I think I thrive in chaos. I think that I don't know if I could do a day job where there wasn't always a fire going on or something to do. Like, you never know what you're going to show up and find at work. So I love that.
Is there anything specifically about your personality that you think like lends towards that, or like where does that come from?
You know, I said chaos, but maybe a better word for it is excitement. I could probably do just fine some sort of desk job, 9 to 5, but a little extra spice, a little extra chaos, a little extra excitement. You know, that's I do well in that situation. Yeah.
Fair enough. I like the word chaos, by the way, and not to be morbid, but someday when you do pass, I think your tombstone needs to read, Andrew Roy, he thrived in chaos, and just let people interpret that as they may, because it's something that a lot of people can't do, and it's a great trait to have for the role that you're in.
Yeah.
That's really all I got. I mean, I thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. I really learned a lot about wine, learned a lot about Mahogany, and just what your experience has been like. Thank you for giving us the time today, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Omaha, as always, thanks for eating with us.